Imagine standing on a cracked, sun-baked plain 4,000 years ago, throat burning with thirst, watching your entire tribe's survival hang on a single question that echoes across every era of human history. Where is the water, and how do we know it will not kill us? Because long before science explained bacteria, parasites, or chemical contamination, ancient humans across the globe were already solving one of the most dangerous puzzles of existence. And the ingenious ways they did it are so clever that some of their methods are still used today. So let's rewind the clock and uncover exactly how our ancestors managed to find, test, and purify water clean enough to keep entire civilizations alive. The story begins with something deceptively simple: location. Early humans quickly learned that not all water sources were created equal, and they became master trackers of nature's own filtration systems, following animal trails to springs, watching where birds gathered at dawn, and noticing that water bubbling up from underground through layers of rock and sand was almost always safer than stagnant pools sitting in the open. Gravity and porous stone were quietly doing the filtering work for them before humans even understood what filtration meant. In the Indus Valley civilization, dating back over 4,000 years, archaeologists have uncovered incredibly advanced stepwells and reservoirs, some of the earliest known water storage systems in the world. The people of Mohenjo-Daro built covered drains and private wells attached to nearly every home, showing a level of hygiene awareness that predates modern plumbing by millennia. And this wasn't just about convenience. Sealed wells and channels kept water shielded from animal waste, dust, and decay, which drastically reduced the risk of disease. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, along the life-giving Nile, people faced constant exposure to silty, sediment-heavy water. So they developed one of the earliest documented purification techniques, using alum, a naturally occurring mineral compound that, when stirred into cloudy river water, caused the fine particles to clump together and sink to the bottom, in a process modern chemists now call coagulation. This left behind noticeably clearer water on top, which could then be carefully poured off and consumed. This method appears in Egyptian inscriptions dating back to around 1500 BCE, proving that even without a single microscope, they understood something fundamental: that clearer water tended to make people less sick. The ancient Greeks took things even further, and this is where things get genuinely fascinating, because the physician Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, invented what is now nicknamed the Hippocratic sleeve, a simple cloth bag used to filter water by pouring it through fabric to trap sediment and impurities. While it couldn't remove invisible pathogens, it dramatically improved taste and reduced visible contamination. Hippocrates himself wrote about the connection between water quality and human health, urging people to boil or strain rainwater before drinking it, which shows a startlingly modern understanding of hygiene for someone living over 2,000 years ago. Over in ancient India, the science of water testing was formalized in texts like the Sushruta Samhita, an ancient medical treatise, where physicians described what's known as Dasha Vidha Jala Pariksha, or the tenfold examination of water, a method that judged water based on its taste, smell, color, touch, and even the behavior of aquatic life within it. The text explicitly recommended boiling contaminated water or exposing it to sunlight. And remarkably, sunlight exposure is now scientifically validated as a real purification method called SODIS, or solar water disinfection, where ultraviolet rays kill harmful microorganisms in clear plastic or glass containers left in direct sun for several hours. Meaning, an ancient Indian medical text essentially predicted a technique the World Health Organization promotes today in developing regions without access to clean water infrastructure. Then there's the Roman Empire, arguably the most famous ancient water innovators of all, whose engineering marvels still leave modern engineers in awe. The Romans built an astonishing network of aqueducts stretching over 400 miles, using nothing but gravity, precise gradient calculations, and incredible architectural skill to transport water from distant mountain springs into cities. Crucially, the Romans preferred spring water and actively avoided stagnant sources, understanding intuitively that moving water was safer than still water. Inside Roman homes, lead pipes called fistulae distributed water throughout cities, which, ironically, we now know introduced its own set of health problems from lead contamination, proving that not every ancient solution was perfect. But the core engineering principle of channeling clean mountain water into urban centers was revolutionary, and laid the foundation for modern municipal water systems that we still rely on today. Across the ocean, indigenous peoples of the Americas developed their own remarkably sophisticated methods. Long before European contact, Native American tribes used natural materials like charcoal, sand, sand and gravel, layered inside gourds or woven baskets, to create rudimentary but effective filtration systems, understanding that charcoal in particular had a unique ability to trap impurities and neutralize bad odors, a principle that modern activated carbon filters, found in nearly every home water filter today, are directly based on. In desert regions, indigenous groups in the American Southwest engineered ingenious rock-lined cisterns and tinajas, natural rock basins that collected and stored rainwater while shielding it from evaporation and contamination, showing an intimate, generational understanding of desert survival that allowed communities to thrive in some of the harshest climates on Earth. In Australia, Aboriginal Australians, who represent one of the oldest continuous cultures on the planet, developed an extraordinary knowledge system for locating water in the unforgiving outback using what's called Nama holes, natural rock depressions that collected rainwater and were carefully covered with rocks or brush to prevent evaporation and contamination from animals. This knowledge was passed down through oral tradition and songlines, essentially an ancient GPS system encoded in storytelling that guided people across vast, arid landscapes to hidden water sources that outsiders would never find, demonstrating that clean water access wasn't just a technical challenge, but a deeply cultural one, woven into identity, survival, and community memory. Back in ancient China, historical texts describe boiling water as a common practice as early as the Zhou dynasty. Traditional Chinese medicine emphasized drinking warm or boiled water for health reasons, a cultural habit that persists strongly in China even today. And interestingly, boiling remains one of the single most effective methods of water purification in human history because heat kills the overwhelming majority of dangerous bacteria, viruses, and parasites, meaning a technique discovered independently by cultures across Asia, Europe, and the Americas turned out to be scientifically sound thousands of years before anyone understood germ theory. And germ theory itself is really the missing piece of this whole story, because for most of human history, people didn't know that invisible microorganisms were making them sick. They simply observed patterns, noticing that certain water sources correlated with illness while others didn't. And through trial, error, tragedy, and generational knowledge sharing, they built systems of purification based on observation rather than microscopic proof, which honestly makes their achievements even more impressive, because modern science had laboratories, microscopes, and centuries of accumulated research, while ancient humans had only their senses, their losses, and their determination to keep their communities alive. It wasn't until the 1670s that Antony van Leeuwenhoek first observed microorganisms under a microscope, and it took until the 1800s for scientists like John Snow, during the London cholera outbreak, and later Louis Pasteur, to definitively prove the link between contaminated water and disease, finally giving humanity the scientific explanation for what ancient civilizations had already figured out empirically through pure observation and necessity. And here's the part that should genuinely blow your mind. Many of today's most advanced water purification technologies are direct descendants of ancient methods. Modern water treatment plants still use coagulation, the exact same principle the Egyptians used with alum, just refined with chemicals like aluminum sulfate. Modern filters still use sand, gravel, and activated charcoal layering, the same core technique used by indigenous Americans and described in ancient Indian texts. Modern emergency water purification still recommends boiling as the gold standard when other methods aren't available, exactly as Hippocrates advised over 2,000 years ago. And solar disinfection, now recommended by global health organizations for communities without clean water access, is essentially the same sunlight-based method described in ancient Ayurvedic texts thousands of years before anyone understood ultraviolet radiation. So when you turn on your tap today and drink water without a second thought, you're benefiting from a knowledge chain that stretches back through Roman engineers, Egyptian chemists, Greek physicians, Indian scholars, Chinese dynasties, Native American innovators, and Aboriginal Australian survivalists, all of whom, separated by oceans and thousands of years with no way to communicate with each other, arrived at strikingly similar solutions because the problem was universal and the human drive to solve it was relentless. And that's really the most powerful takeaway from this entire story. Clean water has never been guaranteed. It has always been earned through observation, innovation, and hard-won generational wisdom. So the next time you fill a glass from your kitchen sink, take a second to appreciate that you're holding the end result of an unbroken chain of human ingenuity that stretches back to the very dawn of civilization itself. So, if this journey through ancient water wisdom fascinated you as much as it fascinated me while researching it, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into forgotten history and drop a comment telling me which ancient civilization's water solution surprised you the most. Because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of what our ancestors figured out, long before we ever gave them credit for it.